The theories and ideas shared in this episode are based on publicly available information and are for the purpose of creative thought and entertainment. The topics we discuss are our own opinions and purely speculative. Our aim is to explore claims made by prominent individuals, verify them best as we can, and discuss their potential reality. We're just two regular dudes who are fascinated by this phenomena. Enjoy the conversation.
Go.
Welcome back to the Rusty Saucer. How we doing today, Andrew?
I'm doing great, Ross. How about you?
I'm doing awesome. I'm excited to talk about Bob Lazar. This guy is he's a big figure in the UFO community, and he's got a lot of mixed feelings around the community. There's a lot of mixed thoughts on Bob and who he is, his story, and the claims that he's made. And whenever you and I started talking about it, I could tell you were really excited to get into talking about old Bob too.
Yeah, I've mainly my experience with Bob has been a few videos and mainly clips on like the Rogan podcast, which we're going to show you guys here later. But I have mixed
Hmm.
feelings on Bob. He's got some wild claims. He's got an interesting history. But yeah, he said some stuff that's turned out to be true. So I mean, he's got some credibility in some of the areas that he touches on. But you guys will see it's kind of a wild journey that Bob's going to take us on with his background and what he has to say.
Right. Yeah, so whenever I first started diving into Bob, I'd seen the Rogan interview a couple years ago. I didn't know if it really held much water, if you will, of his credibility and what he was saying, but it was an interesting story. And um, whenever we talked about, you know, doing a little deep dive on Bob Lazar, whenever I originally started looking into his stuff, checking credibility and things of that nature, it looked like that a lot of his stuff had been debunked. That it was kind of like, I don't know about this guy. However, after like doing a deeper dive, and we're gonna both kind of share the mainstream view of Bob, just kind of giving the history, his accomplishments from the mainstream point of view, and then kind of do a deep dive and see if what the mainstream point of view differs a little bit from possibly the reality of who he is, his claims, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of those videos myself where they debunk some of what Bob has said. So
Hmm.
yeah, if you want, feel free to look on the internet. There's videos backing his claims or debunking what he has to say, just like you said, Ross. So, but interesting
Hmm.
guy, and I think it's worthy of our time to discuss him at the very least.
Right. And for me, just going through this, it really made me question what it means whenever you see something that says it's debunked. And I think that in general, you should be very cautious when people start using that word. Because whenever I was doing further research into this, and everybody can come up with their own conclusion, but whenever I was researching this from my viewpoint, some of the things that were listed as being debunked didn't seem as debunked to me, as a lot of other people have made them out to be. So
Right.
again, we're just gonna kind of provide, everything out there for everybody to make their own decision about this. But it wasn't as open and close of a case as some people might make you try to believe.
Right, and that's one thing I love about doing this is at the end of the day, we want to just present information and you guys draw your own conclusions from it. We have our
Hmm.
opinions and that's why we're doing this to share it with you. But yeah, like I said, at the end of the day, we just want to present the information that we find interesting and see, just spread the word and see what you guys want to, where you guys want to take it.
Right. And before we get started, if you haven't already, if this is your first time here, please like, comment, share this video if this is a topic that you're into. We think that it's important to get topics like this out there. You will not find topics like this on the mainstream media, even though, as I like to say, there are incredible claims made by credible people. Believe it or not, Bob, I don't know if he's going to fit that category of credible people, but a lot of other people that we've done deep dives on do fit that description. And Again, if you do like this kind of content, please give us a like. It goes a really long way for us. It does take a lot of work to make these videos and take time out of our day to, make these presentations. We love it. This is not me complaining about it, but yeah, it means the world to us if you could, join our subscription family.
Agreed. Yeah, every subscriber we're super appreciative of. So for sure, if you hit that subscribe button, tell a friend. We greatly appreciate it at the end of the day. So
hmm All right. Well, let's get to it, Andrew.
okay, so got a little bit to discuss with Bob. So I'm just going to present some information. So Bob Lazar is a controversial figure in the UFO community, primarily known for his claims about working on reverse engineering extraterrestrial technology at a site near Area 51. One of his most notable claims involves element 115, Moscovium. I hope I'm saying that right. Which he mentioned in the late 1980s as a key component in alien propulsion systems. At that time, element 115 had not been synthesized or officially recognized by the scientific community. However, it's important to note that the concept of element 115 was not entirely unknown before Lazar's claims. Theoretical discussions about the elements beyond the known periodic table include element 115 existed in scientific literature. Moscovium was officially synthesized in 2003 by a team of Russian and American scientists. Lazar's assertions about his educational background and employment history have been widely disputed and lack verifiable evidence. Despite this, his story has significantly influenced public interest in Area 51 and UFOs. Bob Lazar is known for creating a jet-powered car in the early 1980s. He modified a Honda CRX by installing a jet engine capable of producing significant thrust. Here are some key details about his jet car. So the engine and performance. The jet engine, made of stainless steel and titanium, was capable of producing up to 1,600 pounds of thrust, though it was often limited to 800 pounds for safety reasons. The car could reach speeds of over 200 miles per hour. Design and modifications. So Lazar made several modifications to his Honda CRX, including adding air scoops and a firewall to protect the driver from the engine's heat. The car's body was remodeled with fiberglass to accommodate these changes. Operation. The car's standard gasoline engine was used to get up to 90 miles per hour, after which the jet engine was engaged for a burst of speed. Publicity. Lazar's jet car gained some attention in Los Alamos, New Mexico, where he was working at the time. Noise from that engine could be heard for blocks.
Yeah, it's a lot, but quite an intro for Bob. And then I'm going to continue a little bit more through his education and claims on element 115 and a few other things here. So, as we talked about earlier, Bob Lazar's claims have been widely debunked or questioned. And so it kind of starts with his educational background. Lazar claims to have degrees from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, also known as MIT, and California Institute of Technology, Caltech. However, investigations have found no records of him attending either institution. His employment history, Lazar stated he has worked as a physicist at Los Alamos National Laboratory. While there is evidence he was employed as a contractor at Los Alamos, there is no proof he held a position as a physicist. Element 115, Lazar, as Andrew mentioned, 115, he mentioned it before it was officially synthesized or recognized by the scientific community. There were theories about it, but it was not yet fully discovered and accepted throughout the community. Um, he claimed that, or let's see here. So, related to element 115, the actual element 115 synthesized in 2003 is highly unstable. This is according to the mainstream science community, is highly unstable and decays within milliseconds. This instability makes it impractical for any sustained use, let alone fuel for advanced propulsion systems, which, as you'll see later in these videos, Lazar talks about how this is the main component to these propulsion systems. Lazar's description of element 115's properties do not align with what is known of Moscovium. The element does not exist the exotic characteristics he describes, such as creating gravity waves. The scientific community has not found any evidence to support Lazar's claims about element 115. The element's known properties are consistent with other super heavy elements, which are generally short lived and highly radioactive. Um, Also, we need to note that Lazar does have a criminal record, and this is including selling illegal chemicals. So, the Federal Hazardous Substance Act violation, this got Lazar and his company in 2006. Lazar and his wife were charged with violating the Federal Hazardous Substance Act. Um, they were accused of shipping restricted chemicals across state lines through their company, United Nuclear United Nuclear Scientific Supplies. These chemicals included substances that could be used to make illegal fireworks. And as we go through Lazar, and if you've seen anything about him, he loves explosions. So,
Yeah.
not a really big surprise there, and not really anything to knock his credibility related being a physicist. So, anyway, so in 2003, Lazar's business was raided by federal agents due to suspicions that he was selling exotic chemicals or toxic chemicals, including um, polonium 210. Polonium 210 is a highly radioactive substance that was infamously used to poison former KGB agent Alexander Litvinico in 2006. I'm sorry if I butchered that name. Um, as a result of these activities, Lazar's company was fined and he received probation. These incidents have further tarnished his credibility and raised questions about his business practices. And basically, to end it, there's lack of, um, evidence for a lot of the claims that he makes, and we're going to dive right into some of these claims. We're not going to be able to get to all of them. I mean, he basically came out in the late 1980s, and in the late 2010s, 2020s, Joe Rogan has been pumping him up a lot. Joe Rogan finds his story fascinating and is one of the stories that really got Joe into this. So we'll have a lot of Joe Rogan clips. We do encourage you guys, if you do find Bob interesting, to watch Joe's full episode with Bob Lazar. It is very interesting, whether you believe his story or not. It's a great story.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
All right. You ready to get into this, Andrew?
Yeah, let's do it, Ross. Let's show them what we got. So this first clip is going to be of Bob quite a few years ago, as you'll notice from the video. We found this on X from the account OMA Approach. It's Bob in an earlier day talking about religious beliefs, and on this channel we don't advocate, condone, or condemn any kind of religious views. So this is going to be Bob talking from quite a few years back.
Right. And this is just, for pure entertainment purposes only. So,
Exactly.
you make your own decision off of this clip.
All right, so let's check it out.
Yeah, the only hardcore thing is that there is an extremely classified document dealing with religion, and it's about that thick. Period. But why would there be any classified material dealing with religion?
I want to go back to the religion thing. I want you to say it.
It's so far out.
All right, your objection has been noted.
Okay.
What does it say?
That we're containers. That's how supposedly the aliens look at us. That we are nothing but containers.
Containers of?
Containers. Maybe containers of souls. You can come up with whatever theory you want, but we're containers, and that's how we're mentioned in the documents. That religion was specifically created so we have some rules and regulations for the sole purpose of not damaging the containers. Yeah, the only hardcore thing is that there is a...
Oops. Yeah, so as this video shows you guys, Bob's been in the media spotlight for years now. Not necessarily very long in the spotlight, but he's been interviewed and talked to because of his claims for a long time now. He has some history. So it's kind of interesting what he's saying here about religion, and he mentions the word aliens. So obviously he's been making claims of knowing about extraterrestrial stuff for years now.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you can kind of tell right off the bat from that clip that it's going to rub some people the wrong way, and understandable too. Also, you want to see evidence of this, and he's gonna, hide, if you will, behind the whole classified wall, of the information or the evidence that he has and what he's seen. And that is what makes a lot of this tough, is that there's no way of us getting to if these people are, telling the truth about different information that they've come across, documentation, whatever, that there's no way for us to get to that documentation and verify it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it is kind of crazy. It's like, he's not the first one to have made claims like these. But it is interesting. And um, I wonder, like, how much he did see. So he said it was a very thick book.
Right.
How much of it did he read? Because it doesn't seem to think of, he's not being very specific. He's saying, oh, it could mean this, it could mean that. For a very thick book, I feel like that you would find something a little bit more specific of what the word container means, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
that's a really good point. That is a really good point. And if you're gonna have the nerve to go out and talk to the media about things, you would think you'd want to bring to the table more proof, like maybe have memorized or written down some passages from said book.
Right. Right. Or specifics of how they harvest these souls, or how they, whatever they do to it. But again, it's like, we're just kind of showing you what he's saying. You can make your decision as we get through more and more clips. Um, our goal is to try to give an accurate representation of everybody and actually give you the chance to see them talking, and for you to assess, is this person full of crap, or um, do they seem like somebody who's genuine, honest, and saying, interesting things that could be true.
Yeah, and regardless of the message specifically in this video, it just really showcases that Bob has been interviewed for decades now. He's been around and
Hmm.
been claiming these extraordinary things for quite some time.
Right. And sorry for just kind of throwing this out there. Like, this one was kind of Bob's biggest curveball, but we saw that it was from the 80s. It was a longer clip, because the majority of our clips are going to be from the Rogan show. But it was like, you know what, let's start out with a vintage Bob clip.
Yeah, vintage Bob I like. So just a warning as well, some of these clips do have some profanity. So we just wanted to give you a heads up on that. We're taking them from the source and just presenting them to you. All right, so for our next clip, we have from the Joe Rogan podcast. This is at the YouTube channel JRE Clips. This is Bob explaining his story, kind of explaining himself and his background. So let's check it out.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
I first heard your story decades ago. I told you last night we went out to dinner. I've seen pretty much every interview you've ever given. I've followed the story incredibly closely. But for people who don't know the story, let's give them the bullet points. You used to work at Area 51. And Area 51, you went like, huh?
Well, we want to be accurate.
Okay.
Area S4.
S4. Okay.
It's about 15 miles south of Area 51.
Okay.
But
You worked in how would you describe it?
I guess within the Area 51 compound, you can call that a subset of Area 51.
And you got that job. Before that, you were working.
Before that, I had worked at Los Alamos
Right.
National Labs in New Mexico.
And you were involved in what kind of work?
Nuclear weapon development, physics. I mean, they do everything there.
So how do they approach you to say, hey, Bob, why don't you come on out to the Nevada desert?
Well, the way this went down was, at that time, it was 1982, I had put a jet engine in my Honda, and Los Alamos put it on the front page of the paper. Said, Los Alamos man, physicist at the lab, built this 200 mile an hour, Honda jet car that I drove to work every day. So I was known in Los Alamos, the guy with the weird car, and you could hear it from a mile away. Anyway, the day that came out on the front page of the paper was the day Edward Teller, the father of the hydrogen bomb, was giving a lecture down there at the lab. And we didn't have much going on that day in our group, and I asked if I could go down there. And I went down there early, and Ed Teller was outside, leaning on a brick wall there and reading the front page of the paper. Now, this is a guy out of history, so I introduced myself. Hey, I'm the guy you're reading about there. And we talked for a little while, and it was cool. Fast forward to years later, I had moved out to Las Vegas and had, left Los Alamos and, went on to other things. And I wanted to get back into the scientific community. I left to start other businesses and that sort of thing. So I sent resumes out, and one of them went out to Ed Teller and referenced our meeting, back in the day. And anyway, he remembered me and gave me a reference, somebody to contact at EG&G. And that's pretty much how it started.
So you get a phone call or a letter? Like, what do you get?
Well, I got what did I get? I got a letter initially and went down for an interview probably a couple times. And it was down at EG&G Special Projects, which was at McCarran Airport at that time out in Las Vegas.
And did they give you any sort of job description of what you were applying for?
They said it was for I can't remember exactly what they did. This was a long time ago, but I think it was advanced propulsion or something like that, something relatively generic. And they said it's in a remote area. It's going to be some days on, some days off. And, it was kind of it was kind of not exactly a full-time job, but you might have to be out there for 2 weeks at a time and take 2 weeks off. So it was kind of the work schedule would be kind of broken up.
And did this seem attractive to you, or did it seem weird?
No, it really wasn't weird, because people that work at the test site, anybody that's familiar with the area up there, working at the nuclear test site or at the Tonopah test range north of there, that's typically how things go.
So you had known about it from the scientific community? Because Area 51 at that time was
No, they didn't say anything about
classified.
Area 51.
Okay, so they
just said it was in a remote location, and you just know it was up at the test site.
Right.
So, but there was no mention of Area 51 at that time.
So they've done hundreds of nuclear tests in Nevada. That whole area there's giant chunks of Nevada that people.
Yeah, there's a big piece of Nevada, and it's split up into different areas. There's a nuclear test site. There's Area 51. There's the Tonopah test range north of that. There's little sub areas. There's areas where they test chemical weapons and things like that. So it's all broken up as a gigantic test area.
So take me back to first day on the job. You accept a job. They take you out there.
Yeah, it's the first day, really, I didn't really get to see a whole lot. The first day was essentially just paperwork. That's when I flew into Area 51 proper. And I left McCarran Airport and flew what they call the Janet flights. Just, a passenger plane from Las Vegas to Area 51. And it was really just going through a mountain of paperwork that day, from security clearances to... God, it was like 2 or 3 hours of just solid paperwork, and that was really an uneventful first day.
Wow. So could you imagine you're just hired on to think, okay, I'm working on some kind of propulsion system, and then next thing you know, you're on a special site for the government, and you're seeing and hearing about things that are just amazing, like just otherworldly.
I know. I can tell you're ready to see what you're ready to hear what he saw, huh?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I've heard before on the Rogan clips, but yeah, it's just like that. Just is mind shocking or mind blowing to me that you could just be a regular guy, maybe be special in your field, and then the government just says, "Yeah, we want you. Come on over." And then they're just, of course, they would be
Yeah.
secretive about everything, but
Right.
Yeah,
Y-
to not maybe even threaten you to say, if you ever tell anybody about this, we're gonna take care of you. You know, I would almost be afraid to talk with some of these claims that he's going to make.
Right, right. And you're signing a bunch of paperwork that you're not really reading,
Yeah,
You're kind of,
probably. Yeah.
it says, "Oh, by the way, there's flying saucers back here."
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, with alien made propulsion systems. Do you, accept that you could be harmed while working on these things?
Right. And from a lot of interviews with people that have claimed to work at Area 51, like they said, everything was so compartmentalized that, your
Hmm.
group would be working on something so specific that you would not even know what was going on next door in the room next to you, you know? So a lot of
Right.
people that were there, they were just working on what they thought were advanced aircraft, that didn't see anything extraterrestrial or that gave them any indication as such.
Right. And yeah, that's a good point. I'm not really sure if our clips are gonna really go over that part of that, because that is a big part of Bob's story, is the cart the compartmentalization of these programs, and how basically each person in these programs was only able to see a very small piece of the big puzzle,
Yes.
and that they were responsible for their piece, and it was very hard to get information about the other pieces, because um they didn't want you to be able to connect the puzzle and be able to share that information with the public.
Right, especially because they
So
had issues with, secrets leaking, or, especially around the time of the atomic bomb testing, the KGB coming in and figuring out things, or information getting leaked. Information did get leaked. So I could see
right.
why they would do it like that. It's just like you said, give everybody a little piece of the puzzle, but not to be able to see the picture as a whole.
Hmm. Yeah, and Bob does talk a lot about that in the full Joe Rogan interview. And yeah, it's very interesting, because he's oftentimes scratching his head going like, I don't know enough information about the related areas of my project. Of It was so dissected that you could only know your area, and you would get in trouble if you were to try to find out more information going on in the other departments, even if it was related to a part that you were working on.
Yeah. I also loved how he talked about his car. And sometimes it's those
Yeah,
little things that get you on somebody else's radar. They could totally see, okay, we got this guy who's driving this jet engine powered car. Like, he would be perfect to look at propulsion systems.
right, right. Yeah, and you were, as you talked about in the beginning, this thing could be heard from blocks away, and he's just driving it as an everyday car with this big jet on the back of it,
Yeah.
going to work and going home. So yeah,
It kind of
he
reminds me
built
of
some good connections.
it reminds me of a similar story where, right when color printers for at home were becoming popular, this guy applied to a computer game development company, and the fact that he sent in his resume with color made them hire him. They didn't even really care about his
Mm,
credentials. They just said, "Wow, look, this guy's got the latest and greatest thing that we don't ever see a color resume before." So it's similar with Bob's story. Like, oh, we don't ever see a guy
right.
who has a car, with this type of propulsion. So obviously he's the man for the job.
Right, thinks outside of the box,
Yeah.
is doing things that other people, are not.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
Our next clip is going to be from the same X channel as our previous video, Unexplained 2020. And this is a clip about the possible origins of some of these craft.
Alright, let's get to it.
Let's check it out.
Idea of where they got them or how they got them.
No, but something must have been said to me from Barry, but I it was just too long ago, and I can't quite remember what was said, but it just left a seed in my mind. I think at least one of them was part of an archaeological dig, so it's old. At least one of them is old. I don't know if it was the one I worked on, but I remember something to do with an archaeological dig.
Whoa.
So that means it's not just old, it's ancient.
That'd be a great Steven Spielberg movie,
Yeah,
right?
as all of it would. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
as
tripped me
all-
out when he said that for the first time.
Yeah. That's a freak out right
Yeah.
there. Just a couple of dudes with some brushes looking for a Tyrannosaurus Rex bone. They
And-
hit metal.
And when did they find it? You know, that they have 9 of them.
Yeah.
Well, and how could we have not heard about that? What about the guys with the brushes? How could
Yeah.
you uncover something like that? And
Well, Joe's newspaper at home does. I mean, they said it on that.
All right. So yeah, the same. I was thinking the same thing as them. Like, how could you be an archaeologist and you're brushing away some sand and then stumble upon a craft and keep that secret? And this is where he did say up to possibly 9 crafts that he worked on. So yeah, I mean, you would think that relics like this, if they were true, would be uncovered all the time in dig sites and things like that. But it may be that if that's the case, someone's just coming in and keeping it all hush hush, or all of a sudden, oh, you're not qualified to work on this project. We got this.
Right. Yeah. Man, that's pretty cool. Like, just to get some sort of verification that it's like these things have been going on for a while. There's quite a number of paintings from like thousands of years ago, religious paintings that have what look like saucers or discs or just crafts in the sky. And there's some even in ancient Indian text and paintings, and it goes back a long ways. And all of these you know craft looking things in the sky, they you can kind of always make some sort of, oh, it could be this, it could be that. That doesn't mean that that's a flying saucer or a UFO or whatever. But it does show up a lot, and there's plenty of alien stories, the Anunnaki in Egypt, a lot of this stuff in UFO lore. So it is kind of interesting to be like, oh wait, if he's telling the truth, it's like, there actually was, these discs at this time in history.
Yeah,
So
that would be so cool to just be on a site and see them uncover something, that was thousands of years old, but still unexplainable to us. Some kind of
yeah.
technology or craft that just blew our minds away because we don't because it was so futuristic, even though it's ancient.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Man, that'd be cool to see.
Yeah, really would. So this next video, it's once again from the Joe Rogan podcast. This is brought to us again by the YouTube channel at JRE Links, or JRE Clips, excuse me. So it's going to be Bob Lazar explaining how the gravity propulsion system works inside of a UFO.
Let's get to it.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
You should tell him some of the stuff that you read that you don't know is true. I mean, if the stuff was true about the propulsion stuff, I mean, anyway,
Well, what have you read? What have you
what
read?
you saw too. I mean,
What are you talking about? Spill the beans, Bob.
I got to poke the bear here a little
Get
bit.
some more liquor in you.
Well, I mean, the only thing I could verify was what I had my hands on. There was talk of weapon systems, that there were different projects. Project Galileo, Project Sidekick was supposed to be weapon applications of the craft. Project Looking Glass had to do with time, any effects of time in the craft. Now, I don't think we're not talking about making a time machine like in science fiction, but we're talking about, small distortions, intentional distortions of time, and how that can be used, as a, not as a, well, it was part of a weapon program.
How are you informed in this? About
These, again, were just the small briefings that I read. But again, I don't really like to talk about those because I don't have any information on them, and it was just, small briefings.
But you told Commander Fravor that what he saw might have been a time dilation and not
it
with
could
gravity
be
propulsion.
because
Yeah.
gravity affects time, space-time. I'm sure you've heard of that. And, what Commander Fravor saw as he was in the F-18 approaching it, he said he described it as a ping pong ball in a cup and shaking it back and forth. It was moving that fast. Now, obviously, if there's anything inside there, it's going to be battered to hell. But, my point was that Well, one of two things. Either there's a gravitational envelope in there which negates any inertia effects, or you are seeing through a gravity distortion field. So, just like you're looking at a hot highway and you see,
Looks like
an
water.
optical distortion going through there. Well, the same thing happens in gravity, and the craft may not actually be moving like that. It may just look like it because you can only see it through the field. So it may be making much more gentle moves. I'm not saying that's it, but it has to be one of the two.
And the thing shows up 60 miles away. They noticed it on radar 60 seconds after it left Commander Fravor, but it was at his cap point, which is the next point he was destined to go to, 60 miles away. And in 60 seconds on radar, the same object ends up there.
So it's going a mile a second.
No, I think the radar just picked it up in 60 seconds.
Yeah, it could have been there instantly, but
We don't know.
the cycle time.
Nobody
on the radio
knows.
was 60
That's the whole thing. Is,
So it cycles, like radar cycles? Like
yeah,
sends
it
out a
doesn't.
beam
It doesn't sweep, but
Right,
I
it's
mean,
like
it
it turn- like-
scans.
yeah,
It's
like
a
that
planar
antenna.
array, so it
Okay.
just it scans around at random places.
that's the spy one does the really cool. Yeah, it
Right.
doesn't do the whole loop anymore.
Right. The point is though that the craft moved to his next location before he knew where his next location was going to be,
Jesus.
and that's well
Documented.
documented. So that's a pretty shocking piece of information.
What's fascinating to me too is that you were discussing this, the way this reactor worked, and that these things were not really connected.
No, nothing is connected. There's no wiring at all.
That freaks me the fuck out.
Charge your iPhone,
Yeah.
like
Well, wireless,
on the little,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a
Well, I
simple
mean, Tesla-
electromagnetic. Yeah, I know again, but that's just simple electromagnetic induction.
Right, but
It's-
I mean, Tesla, the scientist, had this concept of
Right, that's
what he's-
yeah.
that's what I'm talking
I mean,
about.
for other
Yeah.
people that don't know what we're saying, he wanted to send wireless electricity through the sky, and Westinghouse was like, "Get the fuck out of here with that!" Like when anybody could just pull electricity out of the sky.
Can't meter it.
Yeah, they
It's-
couldn't. They couldn't.
We had
meter
this
it.
talk in the car right over. I'm trying to chill him out. We're talking about Tesla and how he couldn't be metered and how it all went down. So it's funny you bring it up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, who knows what would have happened in terms of innovation had he been allowed to go forward with that?
Well, we probably wouldn't have computers.
You think?
Yeah, I'm pretty positive.
Why
I
is
mean,
that?
forget about microelectronics. Well, this is dumping huge amounts of electromagnetic energy in the air. And yeah, we'd be able to wirelessly turn on our lights, but there'd be no radio communication. The interference would be something would be overwhelming. It would induce electric currents in anything with a small wire on it. So integrated circuits, transistors would be disintegrated before they were even, tested for operation. So it would
Maybe
destroy.
it would have fucked us up.
Yeah, it would have stopped us dead. It'd be great. You can turn lighters on and heaters from all over the place with no wires, but it would stop modern electronics.
And if we became dependent on it, it would almost be like our dependence on fossil fuels. Although it's destructive, it's very difficult for us to get off the nipple.
It would have changed the course of how we developed, which is so interesting when you talk about if a civilization, another star system, didn't even start with fossil fuels. They had 115 naturally on their planet, and they're like, cool, anti-gravity is pretty awesome.
Well, the fact that they
I
didn't
think
have
it's important that actually happened.
Yeah.
It might have been stopped in its tracks for a reason.
Whoa. And I think it's incredibly difficult for us to imagine technological progression under another timeline other than the one that we've experienced.
Yeah, that's difficult.
If we imagine what this alien race must have been like, and how, I mean, God, just to be able to see something, obviously we've seen it in different life forms, right? Like we see the life of certain beetles in comparison to the life of certain fish. Very, very different existence, very different life cycles.
Octopus.
Yeah, octopus. Yeah, I mean, we see all these different variables in terms of biological entities on Earth, but we don't see it in terms of technological innovation, as we're the only one that's intelligent that can innovate. I mean, we have intelligent creatures, but they're in the ocean. The only other thing that are like us are dolphins and orcas and whales, and they don't have the ability to manipulate their environment. And subsequently, because they don't have the ability to manipulate their environment, we put them in fish tanks. And we're like, get in the tank, do some tricks.
Right.
You know, the only thing he saw in the craft, if we were considering Bob's story, the only thing that he saw in the craft that he related to that looked like a human could make was this honeycomb hatch. And I always love that because you're like obsessed with this thing that you could recognize.
You know, I only focus on that because it was the one thing that I understood how it worked.
What was it?
And it was the access to the level below, and it was well, you know, if you take you have a 6-pack of beer and you take out the cardboard dividers, set it on the table, you can put a lot of pressure on the top. But if you push it from the sides, it collapses flat. So it was something like that in a honeycomb shape that was essentially some sort of sheet metal, and you could walk on that in the upper layer, but if you took the corner, stuck your finger in, and pushed, it collapsed and made an entryway. So I thought that was a really unique. I'd never seen that before, and it was the only thing in the craft that made absolute sense to me. I said, we can make that, and all that is a hatchway.
Was there any discussion about the materials that were used to make the craft?
I'm sure there was, but that was the metallurgy division. It had nothing to do with us.
So you never got
not even the
hint of it?
slightest briefing. I don't even know if it was metal or it was ceramic. It's I think there's a fine line between the two.
So yeah, that was really interesting to hear. We should also mention
Yeah.
the other guy in that video is Jeremy Corbell, right? Is his name?
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah, Jeremy Corbell.
Yeah, so he's an interesting figure. Maybe one day we'll do a video about him too.
hmm
But yeah, I like the fact that he keyed in, especially what he said at the end. There was one piece inside the craft he was looking at because I believe the context of that video is he's talking
You're
about.
talking about Bob Lazar. You're
Yeah,
not talking about
yeah,
Corbell
sorry.
in this. Yeah.
So Lazar's
Just
saying, you
clarify.
know, he keyed in on that on the honeycomb design was the one thing on the craft because I don't think he said it in this video, but he claims that he actually saw a craft where he was working. Isn't that the case?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, he did. He saw multiple crafts. I think he saw up to 9.
Wow. Yeah. So, you
hmm
know, the whole idea is, oh, there's one thing I recognize in this that I'm going to key in on. I mean, that makes a ton of sense.
hmm Yeah, and just from like a normal guy like me who's not a physicist but is just watching this, to me, I mean, you couldn't have picked a better guy than Bob Lazar to do this, like to talk about this. If it's a hoax, it's a pretty damn good one because, like, or at least from my perspective, this guy knows what he's talking about whenever it comes to propulsions, whenever it comes to um, how machinery works, how it is constructed, how it operates, all of that. Um, now, I could be wrong. Again, I'm just like I'm an average guy who is not, I don't have education in this. I don't have a ton of work experience with this type of um, machinery and, you know, propulsion systems and all that. But to me, watching this, it sounds like that he is very accurate on a lot of the things that he talks about, and he's well versed and he's well informed on a lot of this stuff. And just watching that, it's like, man, dude, this guy looks like he knows what he's talking about. And the things that he's talking about and the experiences that he's talking about, it does seem believable to me. And that's what does make this story fascinating to me, because it's like, this guy, he knows what he's talking about. He builds this kind of crap. He built a car that's got a big jet engine in it, and he's over here talking about, he's educating people on how radar works and how just a lot of these mechanisms would work. Like the door you talked about, that's pretty interesting. You could tell that, he understands engineering and what it would take to create a door like that. And what's also fascinating is that was the only thing that he could figure out, it seems, could work. That's the only thing that could be replicated with human technology. And that's interesting too. He mentioned no wiring. None of these crafts had wiring. And then just going over the gravitational field stuff about manipulating gravity and just I think he said like an envelope of gravity around your craft. And we talked a little bit about this with the Fravor video
Yeah.
of that you could just go into water and you can go into air, and the craft is basically um it has no what's the word I'm looking for? Barrier.
Right.
There's no barriers to it. It's able to, fly at the same types of speeds in the air or in water. And that's what anti-gravity is where you're not, you don't have these forces. You don't have to worry about these external forces in the environment slowing your craft down.
Yeah, and it
And
also makes a
yeah.
lot of sense too, because like he was saying, if there was a pilot in there and this
Mhm.
craft is making these maneuvers that it is, the guys on the inside or the beings on the inside, let's say, would get liquefied.
Yep.
Um, but it is almost dangerous that Bob knows this stuff too, because he can make it believable whether it's true or not. That's another thing you got to remember is,
Right.
he is well versed when it comes to propulsion systems. So he can sound very believable, but yeah, that's a huge claim to say that you've worked on that you tried to reverse engineer multiple crafts that supposed aliens have brought to our planet. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a big claim, and he's never going to have the evidence to show us.
Yeah, that's
you
right.
know,
Yeah.
and either it's not his fault or he's making it all up. But it is it's interesting. It's a really interesting story. And real quick, also just the discussion about the Tic Tac um,
Yes.
radar was interesting. How um, the radar only picked up the Tic Tac 60 miles away, I think it was, just because it finished its rotation. And they were, going into detail about how radar works, that it could have been instantaneous, but the radar wasn't going to pick it up
Yeah.
until it did another round. And that's really interesting to know that, uh, the Tic Tac could have been, at that location within that 60 seconds, which would have made it even more incredible than just getting there in 60 seconds by itself. How
Right.
incredible that is. It could have been even more incredible.
Yeah,
So,
no, that's
yeah.
very true. Yeah, I'm still just kind of mind boggled to think like what would we do if we had some craft from another planet, universe, whatever you want to say, dimension, and then us
Right.
trying to reverse engineer it, that would just sound, it just would be insane.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's built differently. I mean, you have completely the components are completely different. I don't know how you would be able to recognize any of it, and that's what he was saying is I could only replicate one of the things
Right.
out of the many things that you would have to see, disassemble or trying to disassemble something like this.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
that it's a but it really, really cool claims. I wish I could have been in
mhm.
that room with that craft, that would have been fun.
I know, man. Hey, but you couldn't talk about it.
That's true. That's true. I probably wouldn't be talking about it at all. I'd be too scared to
Yeah.
tell you the truth. And throw me
Yeah.
in Guantanamo or someplace like that where you never see light of day again.
Where did Andrew go, man?
Yeah, exactly. So the next clip we're about to play is going to be from an X post from the at unexplained 2020. So this one talks about a star system where these alleged craft or extraterrestrials are coming from. So let's check it out.
Very stressed out by this, which is one of the reasons why I appreciate you doing this.
Where was I already?
We were talking about
right,
the way you explained it.
And so there was some paperwork that indicated that this was from the Zeta Reticuli star system. Now, how they obtained that, I haven't the slightest idea. But it wasn't just from the Zeta Reticuli star system. It was what they called ZR3. So it was a third planet in that star system. So there was no other information about it other than that's supposedly where the craft came from. Now, is that true? I don't know. I have no way of verifying that. But that was printed in the same materials that referenced the reactor. Now, I looked that stuff up when I went home. And Zeta Reticuli is a binary star, two stars that orbit one another. And it's only visible in the southern hemisphere, and it's about 30 some odd light years away. So that's literally all the information I have about that. I don't know how they found out it came from there.
And you also probably have some suspicions that they give you some disinformation, like you were talking about before, where they would,
Yeah.
I mean, if you ever decided to talk about this, they added a bunch of nonsense to make whatever is factual look ridiculous.
Right. Or be able to trace it down. Like, hey, this fax came out, and this Lazar guy said it came from Zeta Reticuli, so they knew it would
when
be
you
me.
read Zeta Reticuli, were you like, what in the fuck is this?
Well, reading all of the stuff, it was, what in the fuck is this?
You're like, why did I sign up for this? Like, what?
No, to me, this was cool. This was interesting. I said, I was just excited to be out in a secure area, in the middle of the desert. I said, this is awesome.
How old are you at the time?
I was in my 20s.
Yeah, so you're probably like, totally geeked out.
Oh yeah, this was great. I mean, I was excited. So I didn't care. I'm reading through everything, and
so you read through all the Zeta Reticuli thing, but then when you see the actual starship with the little American flag sticker on it,
well, was
that later or before?
That was before.
So before. So you see the thing before, and you say, "Oh, this is American."
Wait, what's that before?
Hard. So many years.
Yeah, I can't.
Either way, it doesn't matter.
The days have fused together. It's so hard to separate what happened in each visit to the place.
Do you remember the thought process? Very stressed.
Yeah, so this is where he's alleging that he was told that the craft, at least one of the crafts he was working on, was located, what star system it came from. A really interesting thing about this is there was a famous abduction case in 1961 of Betty and Barney Hill, and Betty Hill drew a map of the Zeta Reticuli star system after her alleged abduction, even though she had no knowledge of astronomy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting. Whenever I first watched that clip, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, I wonder if that's the same star system from the Betty and Barney Hill case.
Yeah, the other thing though is, Bob brings up a good point of, they could feed him disinformation. So maybe they had gleaned that little bit of information from the Betty and Barney Hill case and then just layered it on top of what they were telling him.
Right. And that's also what's interesting about this Bob Lazar case in general, is that there are times that he says, I read a lot of this stuff, but I've wondered if a lot of whatever I was reading was just BS, as some sort of operation, psychological operations. We've talked about psyops here, to see what would the reaction be.
Yeah.
Whenever, people are reading this stuff, what are they going to do?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I mean, it's interesting. You would like to think that, oh, my employer or whoever's showing me this is giving me trusted information, but at the same time,
Right.
it's like, well, if you really are working on supposed craft from another world, how much do they really know at the end of the day, and how much can you believe of what they're telling you?
Right. And if you're actually working on these crafts and have the background that he has with constructing, different, forms of machinery and propulsion systems, that I feel like that maybe there would be something that would give it away of, oh, this is just a prop.
Yeah.
Like, this thing that I'm dissecting is just a prop and not actual, an actual craft.
Yeah, that's
So,
true.
I kind of feel like that I could kind of see, yes, some of this could be BS being fed to people, but at the same time, when you find holes in it, if you're actually working on the crafts themselves. So just
Yeah.
a thought on it.
Yeah, that's a really good point because, like you said, if you're an expert in your field, you think you would be able to poke holes through anything that was not true or disinformation. But yeah, the whole Zeta Reticuli thing, it's really, really cool to think of that, maybe two of these cases are related and we somehow, it gives some possible credibility to Betty and Barney Hill.
Yeah, maybe. And, even if Bob Lazar's education doesn't really add up with, that he can prove with his degrees and everything related to propulsion systems, physics, and all that, he has plenty of experience, as we can, tell, working on vehicles and propulsion systems. So, you can't just say, hey, don't be saying that, he's this great physicist or engineer or whatever, because, his background, his education background has been debunked or whatever. He does have plenty of experience that does show that he knows how the mechanics work in a lot of these, uh, you know, situations. And so just that should be noted as well. Is I think that it's kind of been shown that he does know what he's talking about whenever it comes to putting parts together, and um, having a very good understanding of what a propulsion system is, how it operates, and how all the inner components work.
Yeah,
So
I agree with that. And at the end of the day, too, if you ever do some more deep, or if you ever do a deeper dive with Bob Lazar, you can tell he's an educated, well-spoken guy, you know. So, I
mhm.
mean, that speaks for a lot just there.
Right. All right, you ready to get to the next one?
Yeah, let's check it out.